Well, hi there, it's Mathew Blades. Welcome to Learn from People Who Lived It. We're about to jump into an episode that we recorded last Wednesday with Dr. Dave, the psychiatrist, and Chad from Mental Joe. If you guys don't know, every Wednesday we've got a show called Reserved for Vets where we get down with the discussion that might affect veterans and their families. And this past week, we spent most of the episode talking about that 5-letter word that drives me crazy, that drives my family crazy, and that word is anger. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you're somebody who flies off the deep end a little too quickly. Well, in this episode, we are about to do a deep dive into why that happens, and most importantly, what we can do to become aware and stop it. Enjoy this episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. It's absolute perfection, except for the fact that I actually forgot to engage my microphone, and so the laptop is what's picking me up. So if you can move past that, I think you're in for a great 40-minute sesh.
The Park City trip, the tip that I was going to give everybody, if Southwest.
It's a hot tip, everybody.
Yeah.
Alert, it's a hot tip.
If you lose your luggage, you know what? Be calm and know that you've got about a 3 to 4 hour window to go shop someplace. My second day up in Park City, when we did our little family vacation, I spent about 3.5 hours running through an outlet mall trying to buy underwear and socks. And to this day, Southwest still has no idea where our luggage is at. So we're having to file a claim and go through that and submit receipts, which is just a pain in the ass because you would think, there's a certain allotment per baggage that they would just pay you if you lost it. But no, we got to provide receipts and everything else. And that was just the start of the trip. So, but yeah, hey man, if you lose your luggage, kind of like we talked about before the podcast before we all took break was, shit happens. It's going to happen. So instead of being pissy about it, take a deep breath, look at the outcome down the road and go with it, and prior to any of my mental health healing, it would have been a shit show. I would have been pissed off the entire week. I would have been mad. I would have, I wouldn't have been present. Right. And that's the whole part is all of us wanting to live more in the present and enjoy the time that we have. So that's my hot tip. Stuff goes sideways. It's going to go sideways. Smile and think big picture.
Bam. Look at this guy tossing out bombs already. I'm really impressed because one of the things that I had planned to bring up today was that thing you just mentioned. For those that are tuning into the fact that my voice sounds maybe just a little nasally, it's because I'm like day 8 of COVID. And it is still working me over. And I just can't seem to slide on this thing, even though Dr. Dave was good enough to provide me with his own personal cocktail of herbs and of goodness to start taking. I probably got on that just a little bit too late. But turns out I don't COVID well. Turns out COVID makes me a little angry. And I had a hard time with perspective this week at my own house. And I thought, this is a theme that you pretty much hear about all the time, men and anger. So why don't we jump down that road today? I'd love to know what you know about the subject, Dr. Dave, and what, your life and dealing with folks all the last 2 decades has taught you about it. And then Chad, I guess you and I will pretty much kind of, chime in just personally on days or times where it hasn't gone so great for us, and all in an effort to get guys better on that. Sound good?
Absolutely.
What do you see, Dr. Dave? You see, this thing, I've been told a lot of things about anger. Been told that it's useful. Been told that it's horrible. Been told that it's something that they never want to see again. It has a lot of different definitions in my life. How do you see it?
Anger, the degree of anger can be looked at as the gap between what your expectation is and what reality is. If you expect things to be a specific way and it's way, way off and you can't adjust for it, the anger is going to be more intense than if things are going according to plan. And there's a lot of things that go into anger. We talk a lot about previous traumas, right? So if you have an exaggerated fight or flight response, anger is going to flare up more quickly, be set off easily, come off more intensely than somebody that hasn't had previous trauma, right? So there's a piece of that as well. Once anger gets going, it's hard to rein it back in. You have that adrenaline drop, and it's very hard to shut it off, yourself. It's much better if you can avoid it than to try to turn it off once it gets going.
What do you want to add, Chad?
I'm probably a pro when it comes to anger. And through my, almost 45 this fall, my first 15 years out of service, a lot of it was because I was, I had these expectations, like Dr. Dave said, right? Everyone has these expectations, and sadly my expectations always get the best of me. Mainly is, I give everyone, to the best of my benefit, 110% all the time. I expect that from everybody else, but not everyone runs at my 110%. And it's taken years to understand that and learn to notch back. But the expectations is the biggest thing, I think, that gets me and creates that anger. Like I said, when I got out of the service, my expectation was I was going to be full-blown airborne ranger. Then I was going to go into, special forces, and then maybe, one day go into Delta. That was kind of my dream. That was my path. And then when I had the night jump where it essentially blew my back out, and then because you're in special ops, you don't say anything, right? You put your head down, you shut up. So years of popping pills to get rid of the pain, and alcohol on top of it. And then I'm from a small town in Montana, where there's not much to do but drink and bar fight. So, it was real easy to notch up that anger and get there. And I would say I've come full tilt. I mean, I'm a human being. I still have, times where I'm upset, but I understand those triggers now, whether it's, the cotton mouth or the clenching of the jaw or the clenching of the fist or things of that nature. I think it's just key. And I think Dr. Dave would probably agree, is if we can understand our bodies and what triggers that anger emotion, it's a lot easier to kind of pull back and talk yourself out of it. But when you're full-fledged bright red anger, I mean there's times I had 2-3 guys have to pull me off of another human being in a bar. I mean, you black out, you see tunnel vision. So when it comes to anger, that's probably the one emotion I'm very familiar with, sadly.
Yeah, me too, dude. And I'll tell you, I had that episode the other day, and the whole thing I'm thinking, like, after it's done, right? Like when I finally got out of my head and kind of calmed down a little bit, I was like, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep going back to red? And not that it happens a ton in my life, right? But it's so, I'm genuinely perplexed by it. I'm generally, as a calm guy who practices meditation, who has, I think, a decent worldview. Why is it still a struggle for me to not go see red? Do you have anything to offer there, Dr. Dave?
Yeah, I want to address both of you, actually. So what you're talking about, Matt, you've been feeling sick for the last several days, right? So your resistance is worn down. Your reserve is worn down, right? So little things are going to get under your skin a lot more easily than if you were healthy and in your regular routine and feeling good and feeling alert and on top of things, right? So under periods of stress or when we're dealing with illness, people tend to revert back and use more, for lack of a better term, primitive ways of coping with things, so kind of defaulting to anger or even just being irritable and having a low tolerance for things. I think it goes with the territory when you're not feeling well. It could happen if you're sleep deprived. It could happen if you're hungry. It could happen, for a number of reasons. So that's not a huge surprise. I think in dealing with that, if you kind of know, so the first time you snap at somebody, it's like, okay, so now I see where I am right now in terms of my tolerance. And there's about this much tolerance right now.
Right.
Well, my strategy is just to alert everybody that that's what the situation is. Because I remember when I was working in hospital administration, if I just got out of a bad meeting and I was just ready to rip somebody's head off, the first thing when I would see my secretary is, I am having a bad day. I am ready to beat somebody senseless. Please just be aware of that and, give me some space. And I would do it with a bit of humor and just kind of let them know. And then, before I know it, my secretary's bringing me in a cup of coffee and going out of her way to try to soothe things over a bit, and a lot of times too, family will do that for you if you give them a heads up, so you can kind of cushion the area around you if you give people a little bit of advance warning. And another thing too is to address Chad, with the lost luggage, you already had it in your mind that things could go wrong on the trip, right? You already worked through some of your anger stuff from before, so you had strategies in place to not go there. So when you start to see the earliest signs, like, okay, the luggage didn't show up. Now this is an opportunity for anger to really flare up. So what are you going to do? Are you going to just automatically respond in anger, or are you going to like think it through and like you kind of know where it's going to lead? And if you follow that path down, it's not going to take you to good places. So you have an opportunity to make a different choice in that situation and take a different path with it. Some people use anger just as a communication style. So when things happen, they just respond angrily out of habit. So it's not always just trauma based, or it's not always just, low tolerance, but sometimes it's just a style of communicating. And I think what can snap people out of that is when you stop and take a look at what it's doing to the people around you. I find a lot of things that people complain about when they're dealing with other people are really self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So if your worldview is that the world is full of assholes, and I know that if I, walk down the street, I'm going to encounter at least 2 or 3, and it's going to be a nasty interaction. I'm going to end up getting into a fight with somebody because somebody's going to say something that's going to set me off. You will find that because you'll radiate this irritability. Somebody asks you a neutral question, you're going to snap at them, and then you're going to set them off in the wrong way. And then as soon as they start getting a little tight, it's going to amplify and confirm for you what you thought going into the situation. So you get what you're looking for out of life. If you're looking for assholes, you're going to find them. If you're looking for a smooth situation or problem solving, or for things to, maybe not start out well, but end up well, if you're looking for that, you'll find it.
Well, you used this word earlier, primitive, right? And the word that I was going to say, right, when you were saying was primal, right? Anger almost seems to be that primal response. And while maybe it served us really, really, really well years ago, right, when it literally was more about life and death, it was okay. But, is it going to take a long time for almost the evolution of man to kind of slow their anger roll a little bit? Is there anything there?
Oh, sure. I mean, everybody has a different temperament. So some people are wired to be a bit more aggressive just by nature, maybe more risk-taking, more forward, more aggressive. I mean, and that could just be a person's constitution or just kind of the way that they're wired. But I think if you look at how it affects other people around you, kind of take that step outside of yourself for a moment and kind of just see, is that getting you the results that you want? Is that getting you the type of interactions that you want? Because if it's not, then it's time to relook at what you're doing and maybe try a different strategy.
When you say remove yourself, so me, again, past veteran, drinking, essentially hid pain pills from everybody in my life for probably 10 plus years, right? I mean, when you're in that situation, you don't have the tools to remove yourself or see how it affects others. What would be a piece of advice to maybe give someone that's listening that is in that space that can't quite get out of that space to understand that they're affecting so many other different lives and decisions around them by being angry?
Measure your misery index. How miserable are you feeling? If you're feeling miserable most days, then there's probably something going on that needs attention, right? And so you're never going to be able to do it in the heat of the moment. But when things are quiet, when there's no immediate conflict or confrontation, take a look at what's going on. Like, why do I feel like garbage all the time? Why do I feel angry all the time? Why do I let like stupid things get under my skin like this? Start asking questions. So that's the stepping back part, is asking questions of yourself. But I think you have to recognize it first before you can even do anything about it. Maybe you recognize it when you hit bottom, and bottom doesn't have to be like bottom. It could be like a low period. You get into an argument with your spouse, or you get fired from a job. And it's like, well, wait a second, what's going on? So a lot of times these things, especially the things that are tied in with early childhood, they did serve a useful role for a period of time, even if it is maladaptive in other situations, or even if it, really wasn't the best solution, but it might have been the best solution in that situation at that time. The problem is once you get used to doing things a certain way, you just generalize and do it even in situations that doesn't call for it.
Yeah. And again, to piggyback off that, again, I tell the folks that are listening and mainly my veteran compadres out there, you're going to know, and you've got to understand your body. Right. If you, like I said, if you're clenching your hands, if you're clenching your jaw, like I know when I'm upset, my jaw is clenched and I'm like, oh shit, it's time for a little 5-minute walk and some breathing exercises. Pay attention to that stuff, because once you're there, you can start talking yourself out of these situations and these anger moments because you understand the signs now. Right.
Everybody has a tell. So if you know what your tell is, and it could be clenched jaws, it could be neck pain, it could be tension between your shoulder blades, it could be clenching your fists. Everybody's got something. And if you know what yours is, then you can be looking for it, or when you're aware of it, say, okay, I know what that is. I know what I need to do.
I'll tell you the other motivation that I have for getting it under control and just, those moments where we have tension and whatnot is that the body, I've come to learn that the body's releasing this oxidative stress. And that oxidative stress, unless we kind of clean it up, it can really turn into crap, right? There's starting to be just incredible research out there that's mind-body connection to everything. And I think maybe it was a couple of weeks ago that we all kind of jumped on and talked about how doctors as a whole, or the medical profession as a whole, they segmented everything to study it separately. And as such, we've grown up to think about them as separate things. And so we'll say, well, my gut doesn't feel good. And we'll be like, well, it's the same thing as your head. My backache is really bad today, but it didn't hurt yesterday. What is that? Something's going on, right? And so to me, my motivation is almost like, I don't want any more back pain. I don't want any more hip pain, right? I just want, and we all know what I'm talking about. When things feel a little bit worse, that stuff flares up, right? Are you excited by some of the stuff that you learn about that regarding mind-body connection and pain and disease, Dave?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about anger in particular. It's a slow killer. It really does a number on your circulatory system, puts wear and tear on the heart. It does damage to the blood vessels, and then leading to calcifications in the blood vessels, strokes, heart attacks. It doesn't get you right away, but it's going to shorten your years. So, I mean, there's a good reason to get a handle on anger because it just puts a lot of wear and tear. The way I think of it is if you have a car and you're driving and every time there's a green light, you mash your foot to the floor and leave a patch of rubber and go as fast as you can. And then the light turns red at the next intersection. You slam on the brakes, all that aggressive stopping and starting and stopping and starting is going to wear out your brakes. It's going to wear out your engine. It's going to put, a lot of wear and tear on different moving parts. Your heart and your circulatory system is like the main moving part in your body that's responsible for keeping all the other pieces going. And when you allow anger to flare up quickly, you're dumping that adrenaline, you're, increasing your blood pressure, you're increasing your heart rate. There's a lot of pounding, and that's going to take a toll over time.
Yeah, I thought that analogy you had, I thought you were talking about my wife's driving for a second. So I hope she's hearing and knowing that you can't do that. You'll wear quicker on a car. But no, with that being said, I would probably say that's when I really started recognizing, Dr. Dave, for me, is in that corporate environment, because there's so much red tape, as you know, in the VA. I got super frustrated. I always looked at corporations as the Titanic, right? They're this huge ship that can't turn quite quick enough. But you got these little companies out there like a speedboat, right? They make a quick turn, they make a decision, they're off the beaten path and they're moving on. And that's where, Mental Joke kind of got launched, because I was so tired of the rigmarole of corporate America. I knew the stress was bad. I was pissed off every time I left work. I wasn't happy. And it was that time that's like, okay, it's time to make a change and we've got to figure it out. And that's to piggybacking off of all the great advice you've given today.
Well, I loved our chat today. So this bit about anger, because it just plays in so many spaces. And When it showed its face in me this week, I thought that's not what I want to be about. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who feel that same way after they have an episode. They go sit with themselves and they go, that's not what I want to be about.
Walk it back.
Explain that.
So you snap at your wife and she walks away looking hurt. And then once she's out of the room, you think, oh, jeez, why did I do that? So go apologize when you get another chance, or call her right back and say, oh, hold on, let's try that again. Let me try that a little different, and repair those relationships, because the people that you have, that you care about and that care about you, that's your support. There's a lot of things to fight and there's a lot of things to get angry about. But if you're directing it at your own support, you're just eating at your foundation. It's not going to be good.
That is true. I'd probably say I can go 1 to 5 pretty quick, but now that 5 to 10 is a step process. And if I get to a 10, it's usually probably because, someone's attacking my family or someone's doing something else, an act that probably shouldn't be done. That's probably when I reach that 10. Anymore, I can get to 5 and I can realize that I've got to notch things back a little bit.
You like that, don't you, Dr. Dave? That whole 1 to 5, but then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are incremental steps.
Yeah, it's not about not getting angry, right? It's about how you're expressing your anger and who you're taking out in the process. Another thing that I neglected to mention earlier, like at its core, anger and getting angry over things is a reaction to a trespass, right? So when there's a boundary in place and somebody steps over that boundary, the anger is there to reinforce the boundary. So at its fundamental level, that's what it is. Now, you might have inappropriate boundaries, and that is leading to anger at the wrong times. A lot of times people can agree on boundaries. So, if you're getting angry, the other person understands, okay, yeah, I understand why he's getting angry. I kind of stepped over the line there. But if you grow up in an environment where you're not taught how to set boundaries, or if you're invalidated and you don't have any boundaries, or you're setting your boundaries too far on the other person's side, that's going to lead to conflicts. And so as adults kind of looking at it, ask the questions, where are my boundaries and what's reasonable to expect of another person? And can I reasonably expect them to agree to where I'm setting the boundary?
Just because my brother's up here, and you just kind of touched on something like a quick story I have. We're doing a Christmas actually up here in the Prescott Flagstaff area, and I have misophonia. Dr. Dave, I'm sure your understanding of misophonia, Mathew, I don't know the full correlation of it, but it's like sounds, right? People chomping, eating loud, pop, that kind of stuff. We were at this Airbnb. I never thought about it before. My brother was chomping food with his mouth wide open, and I lost my shit. I was just like, can you not eat food? Can you shut your mouth? And I didn't realize, like, it didn't bother anybody else. Like, no one else heard it, right? It was just me, but it was so, the crunching and the loudness was so aggravating. It put me to a 1 to 10 real quick. But once I found out I had this misophonia, or just this hearing, and I don't know if you want to call it an impairment, then I realized, oh shit, that is a me issue. And how do I control that? Well, the controlling is, if I see someone chomping with their mouth open, I'm going to excuse myself and go to another room, and they can eat dinner in peace and I won't have to worry about it. So I know there's listeners out there that have some of those issues, and you don't realize it. Like, why did I go off the edge on this? Well, like you said, hearing sensitivity type stuff. And that's what triggered that moment. And so fast forward, now I can look back and go, wow, that was crazy. Why?
Well, like Dave said, right? They've crossed a boundary of yours. You have a thing where you hate sounds, and they're doing a sound. And so that's happened. And now it's up to you to decide if it's going to be like rational or not for you to go AWOL on them over some crunching, right? That's kind of the conscious part about this, right, Dave?
I mean, it's unreasonable to expect that the entire world is going to maintain a library for you.
Right. Right.
So you have to find a balance between, okay, I can't take this anymore, I need to step out, right? But also kind of knowing that this is your issue, and getting angry with them, like they're not aware of it, they're not intentionally trying to irritate you, so that's part of the stepping out of yourself and kind of looking at the situation and trying to understand the pattern a bit, because you could just as easily get angry with everybody and lash out at everybody because they're snapping gum or they're, shuffling their feet too much. And they're going to be perplexed as to why you're getting pissed off all the time.
For military guys specifically, our veteran community specifically, how much anger is still in the military? Is that still, is that a common thread in the units? When you guys are out, you're dressed up and you're doing, your job, would you say a certain assertiveness, a certain directness, a certain edge is usually present?
I've been out for a while, but just with some of the guys I still talk to today that are still in, it's very prevalent. It's very, angerish, I guess. And I wouldn't even say angerish, right? Especially if you're in the combat arms, right? If you're infantry or you're part of, spec ops or whatnot, seconds are lives, right? So if I tell you to move, I expect you to move. Don't question, just go. Because if you question in that quick second of questioning, 2 people are dead now. Mm-hmm. So that heightened realization is there. And I think it's always going to be part of the military. I wouldn't say so much anger, but of maybe urgency.
The reason I ask that question is because it's hard, I think, to separate the two sometimes. When you're in that community, and yes, seconds are lives, that's one thing. When your 4-year-old and your 8-year-old, haven't done their chores, and it's 3 hours later and you're still like, what is going on here, and you light them up for it, it's like those aren't the same things. Talk about that a little bit. There
has to be a certain level of precision and perfectionism when it comes to the military, because exactly what Chad is saying, if you're preparing to go out on a convoy and you were sloppy with preparing your gear, you're not paying attention to the briefing and you're missing details of it, all of those things potentially are lives lost, right? So when somebody says you need to go do this, and I mean now, they really mean now, and you get in the habit of doing it that way because it's necessary for the time that you're in service, or especially when you're on deployment. And it's very easy because of that conditioning to take that into your family and lighting up the toddler, for leaving toys on the floor. You have to realize the context of it. The situation that you're in now as a civilian is not a life or death situation. To be sure, there can occasionally be life or death situations, but most of the time, most of the things that people are getting angry about are not life and death. And especially when you see how it affects other people. If you're dealing with another person in the military and you're being hard on them, they know what to expect because they're there. They signed up for the same thing that you did, right? So there's a context to it where not only is it expected and necessary, but it's received because you're all there to do the same thing. On the civilian side of things, family are not going to view it the same way.
Yeah, and I found that out the hard way and the long way, right? Going back to expectations. Right? Because in the military, you have a certain set of expectations and urgency that shit has to happen with. Same thing out in the civilian world, not so much. And I'm learning that with my boys. I might get a little angst about something and Carrie will look at me and she's like, he's 5. And I'm like, yep, you're right. That's fair. His prefrontal cortex is not even freaking completely formed, so the rationale is not there, and the thing is it's taken me all this time to understand how the brain develops and the body develops and all this other stuff to go, okay, yeah, he is 5. I've got to get eye to eye. I have to explain it and we'll work through it together. So it's, I've been out 20 years and I still kind of struggle with that urgency thing.
I can throw in a parenting tip on that.
Love it.
When it comes,
we got a Southwest tip today and a parenting tip. This is going to be a landmark episode here. I love it.
So when it comes to dealing with kids, it's helpful to have clear expectations ahead of time, right? So rules and expectations, and then when it comes to enforcing it, you're the referee, right? So the referee doesn't get angry if somebody commits a foul. The referee doesn't get angry when the other team scores. They just call it like they see it, dispassionately, not yelling and screaming. It's like, nope, you fouled that other person and this is the penalty for it. And we agreed to the rules, and these are the rules, and this is where you crossed over, and this is the penalty for that. And if you can take the anger out of it and just be a referee, you can still shape the behavior and not cause fear or cause secondary trauma with the kids.
And we get to use a whistle.
I love that analogy. A referee
that
just hit my little brain. I was like, okay, that's fair. I can step back and play referee with these little farts. I'll put some timers on, and we'll do so. We'll get this figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we will. Well, man, thank you very much. I enjoyed today's conversation. I hope that others did too. And I think if there's some great takeaways from today's podcast episode, it's really about becoming aware. You're always into some strategies and just having some action items ready to go. And you served up 3 or 4 juggernauts today, Dr. Dave. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And once again, we should pay attention to the apparel. I've got the T-shirt on today and the hat on today. We can't see Chad because, as you heard, they left his luggage and he still doesn't have any clothing. So we've got him locked out. But the apparel line supports non-traditional therapies, and that can fly anywhere from ketamine to equine therapy and everything that's in between. So we encourage you to check out the apparel and support them with a hat and a hoodie and a T-shirt and the whole thing. All right, we'll huddle up next week. Reserved for Vets every Wednesday. We stream at 4. We're always welcome and open to your feedback. If there's anything you're sitting on, we've started to discuss something, you're like, I want more on that. And you want to tell us, be so direct and say, can you guys do a whole show on blank? We're really here to serve you in that capacity. So let us know what we can do for you. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, let me second that. I think the feedback is really useful, because we may touch on something and to us it may be incidental, or maybe it's something that we've already feel like we got a handle on. But if the audience sees something that they want to go in, take a deeper dive on it, we can certainly do that.
Love that. That's a great attitude. Chad, have a great day and enjoy the rest of your time in small town, wherever you are with that fabulous internet.
Yeah, appreciate it, gentlemen.
All right, guys, take care. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.